we go.
Here.
The D&D game has frequently dabbled in time travel, both as story hook and as mechanical device. So join us today as we make ripples in the concept of time travel and provide a few tools to help guide your characters in and out of time like the legends of tomorrow. I love the sound effects. Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome, heroes, to the Crit Academy. I am your host, Justin.
I'm your co-host, Ian.
I'm your co-host, Brandon.
Anyone can take that
We
one.
hope to inspire you with creative content that you can bring with you on your next adventure.
Yeah, that's it. Today's topic, obviously, is time travel. And let's be honest, this is going to be a fun one. I hope if you're in the audience and you've experienced either as a player or as a GM a game of time travel, please share your experiences, what went right, what went wrong, all that stuff. It's really, really awesome. So with that, you don't really have to go too far to, or you don't really have to look too hard to come across a story involving time travel. We find the plot devices in many different genres, books, films, comics. Although science fiction leans the heaviest into time travel, killer robots set back in time, kill the mother of a dangerous revolutionary is a very, very well-known example.
Where's that, Connor?
And I think that it's grown even more lately, right? With the Marvel Cinematic Universe really leaning heavily into it.
Oh yeah.
I don't think
Doctor Who always did.
Doctor Who did it for a long. Was always kind of it. That's his whole shtick, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
in a way, he can't travel to specific areas that he wants to. It's always a specific moment in time that he can go to.
that's still time travel.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's a good point. So there's a lot of different things to kind of hook and talk about today. We have a few overview. We have some notes, but I think we're going to talk, if we can, about most of our personal experiences as we've kind of gone through it. But we do want to touch on some key points. Specifically, there is a problem with time travel.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, time travel already exists in D&D.
It's true.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Time passes in the game. The DM controls time flow to manage the story, speeding it up and slowing it down. But time travel is more than watching sand fall through an hourglass.
Yep. Time travel in the fantastical sense is the ability to travel from one point in time to another, either forward or backwards without changing physical location. For our scientists out there, we aren't talking real physics, so definitely leave that at the dungeon's door.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I want to talk about, we mentioned that D&D already time travel kind of already exists in D&D.
Yep.
And I do want to give a huge shout out to Gabe from Interparty Conflict. He did say if you don't talk about the Sphinx, we're going to have a problem. So if you're not following along in the monster manual, the Sphinx monsters themselves actually do have time travel. Specifically, they have lair actions that allow them to shift and move people any range up to 10 years in the future or the past.
Yep.
Just right out the gate. So this is already a trope that we can lean into heavily with something like this, right?
Want me to do it again?
So
10 years later.
They keep sending you back in time every time you get the riddle wrong, hoping eventually you'll get it right.
so is that to say that if you were an adventurer for 2 years, and in that 2 years you've gotten to like level 10,
Yep.
and they drop you back 10 years, does that mean that you lose everything you've learned?
That's a damn good question, and that's some of the things we're going to talk about.
I would say no, but that's another topic unto itself.
Well, that's part of this topic. That's the things we want to talk about. So that stems into how you want to run the time travel, right?
Now I think about the episode of Futurama where Fry the Scarab teases his own grandpa.
So let's delve into
that's a funny episode.
the core of the time traveling stories. Let's be honest, no science, as Ian said, keep that shit at the door.
You'll hurt yourself.
Yeah, it'll kill your brain. But
Einstein's theory of relativity. Shut the fuck up.
So the first thing I want to touch on is branching timelines and fixed points. So one way to think about time is to imagine it as kind of a braided line with no beginning and no end. The braids are all the objects in reality kind of woven together to form a line. Now, the line does represent all the moments in time, represent all the moments in time, though it is worth noting that some worlds treat time more like a wheel where ages return as the wheel turns.
The
Bum, bum, bum,
in
the Wheel of
sky
Time, right?
keeps on turning.
And it's not, and honestly, Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time actually took that inspiration from Hindu legend and lore. So he's not the first person to think about it, but
No.
it's definitely fun. So though this is not the approach we will be discussing, it is worth noting that the sequence of events on the timeline, all moments occur simultaneously. People perceive time flowing in a single direction, but past and future are relative to one's position on the timeline. And I think that's going to become very key on some of these things we're going to talk about here in a second.
It's more like a big bowl of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah. Loki and the Avengers Time Heist is a great starting point for building out your story and adventures to involve time travel. They handle the explanation of branching timelines and design of the multi-universal concept. Each decision a person or creature makes creates new branches, meaning it's likely infinite timelines or possibilities exist. This mixes very well with the direction that the Wizards of the Coast has been going with the multiverse too.
Yeah, which I think is really important to touch on. So before we move on, this is something that's really interesting because this is probably the most traditional sense of time travel, right? What?
One of the simplest to go with, at least.
Yes, and because of for instance, the branching, it makes it easy to explain kind of why something may or may not change when they jump in the past, make a change, and jump to the future. That's one of the easiest ways to explain that away, right? There's a few different examples. Brandon, do you want to delve into this a little more?
Yeah, as a DM, it's highly recommended to create a large timeline with what you determine are fixed points in time. These events unfold no matter what changes happen. This ensures you have a bit of control over the lore of the world and events that happen. I like that idea. A great example would be a major war between factions. The war is a fixed point. It will happen. But the characters making changes in time may alter who wins and how. So be flexible when creating fixed points.
Absolutely. You know, more
I like
importantly,
that.
the
That's
timeline provides interesting moments where the characters themselves can set an adventure, right? So if you have several points like a great cataclysm or a war of the realms, you can use these to ask your players where they want to play, which is interesting, especially if they can jump back and forth between time, allowing them to experience those huge world-defining moments firsthand, which is pretty interesting, especially if you're a dungeon master that loves to build lore that nobody gets to experience, right?
I like that idea.
Now I'm thinking about all the various anime I watched that involve time travel, and it's making my brain hurt.
Yeah. There's a good question here I want to get on once you finish that last point there, Ian.
Yep. The point on the timeline that the group chooses to explore becomes the present, and everything that happens in the game adds definition to that period and perhaps future times.
Yeah. So there's a good question here in chat coming up from our buddy Andrew. It says, theoretically, I gotta get this thing out of the way. Theoretically, if you have a disease and a sphinx ages you older, does the disease ravage your body for the 10 years of damage? This is interesting because I think that depends on how the time travel is represented.
And what the DM wants to do to you.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple different ways we can take this, right?
And if you really want to be technical, from your perspective, did you stand there 10 years doing nothing, unmoving?
That's the thing. Is your character moving through time, or are you aging, or is the world revolving around you? So I think the answer to that would be depending on that situation.
Yeah.
Stepping through a portal that sends you to the future is not aging your body.
That would be jacked up. Oh my god. From that specific point. You're all fighting a Sphinx, right? So party of 5. And you get flung 10 years in the future. And it's not you that ages. You yourself are being moved along that timeline, and you're popped right there. In an instant, you're sitting there fighting a Sphinx with your friends. It looks at you, does that, and you're in the exact same spot. And you look down, and you see all 4 of your friends' skeletons just sitting there.
Oh,
you're like,
God.
oh shit, that you needed me.
That sucks. So in the talking about branching timelines and fixed points, I really think that this is fun because as a dungeon master, if I create a fixed point in time, I'm a big Final Fantasy 14 fan. So let's talk about the cataclysm that ravages the world, the beginning of A Realm Reborn, a Bahamut is freed and destroys. What if in that story, the original story, he was that the characters go back and he's breaking free, but their actions find a way to keep him imprisoned, right? But it's not a spoiler alert. It's literally the beginning of a game that's 10 years old, Alicia. And so if the players go back to that fixed point, the fixed point that doesn't necessarily he gets free. It's actions led up to him starting to break free, right? And so what happens, what now is going to unfold that, let's say he does break free. What if the actions the players take end up being the exact reason it breaks free? So the characters become self-fulfilled prophecies, right?
You don't like in Red versus Blue where what's his face finds out he's responsible for everything.
Yes,
Church.
Church, yeah.
Where he's going back and forth, but that's what I'm talking about. These are the things you can play with within your own fixed points, or you can let the players really change them, which is a lot of fun, right?
And it's not even, and now we're not even talking about time bubbles, because I remember in Stargate where they basically trap some the replicator, their nanotech race, by trapping it in a time bubble, saying we can't deal with them in another way. But then even though time was slowed down in that bubble, they eventually got to the device that slowed down time. They took control of it and then sped it up to evolve themselves a higher.
That's awesome. I love that.
Carla. I thought your name was Sheila.
Name overwritten. You may call me Sheila.
Oh, I'll do that.
There's great sources out there you can use for inspiration, right? But I do like the idea of fixed points being influenced by the actions of the characters. But you want to make sure that it's not one of those things where no matter what they do, nothing changes. But you want to change the way the world unfolds and reacts to the changes they're trying to implement, right? Self-fulfilling prophecy, one of my favorites. Shit, we were trying to stop it from getting free, and we done messed up that guy that could do it. All right, so I want to dig into this little to the next step of this, which is causality and paradoxes. Ian, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, events have causes. One event causes us a second, which causes us third, and so forth, building on a chain of events, which is commonly referred to as the butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
All dependent events transform, perhaps disappearing altogether. At best, this actively alters the future. At worst, it creates a paradox that breaks the timeline.
Yes, I love paradox. We're going to talk about that. Right, Brandon?
For example, Strahd von Zarovich, everyone's favorite vampire, and he's also Toral's first vampire. After killing his brother, the city was sucked into a demiplane. But if a clever character delves into Strahd's past and convinces him to pursue a life of peace, then he never becomes the first, which means there are probably no vampires in the world now. If so, why did the character go back in time? If there are no vampires, when they chose to go back in time. Fixed points can help reduce events such as these from happening, or at the very least help you maintain control of that result.
Now, the simplest way to go here is we established already forking timelines.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the best ways to do it. And there's a lot of different shows that do that. Obviously, the big one right now is, Loki really talked a lot about, you got the prime timeline and then it starts branching because people be fiddling with shit. And so now you get variants of these different characters. And I like the idea of a character returning to their time, but maybe everyone being just slightly different variants of themselves. And how do you know you get back to the exact same branch you were on? You know what I mean? Because that becomes a whole new thing. So now you jump back, you take care of Strahd because he's doing some shit. You wipe him off the planet. You jump back. Now there's no vampires, but there's also no elves, and there's no dwarves, and there's just humans everywhere. Because of one change you made. Okay, there's no vampires. That was your goal. You succeeded. But are you in the right timeline, or is everything that's different because of the decisions you made? You know what I mean? It's a real mindfuck, to be honest, when it comes to time travel. Which does go ahead.
like I remember I was watching a video which showcased I think it's the French fantasy show Whack Fu, which you can watch on Netflix.
That's a good show.
But basically the main villain does a lot of really terrible stuff.
Oh yeah.
But then he found out why. Basically, in the past, his family was killed, so he's trying to gain power, and he basically justifies it by saying, "Everything I do won't matter because once I go back in time and save my family, none of this will happen anyway."
So he's okay being a douche.
Yes.
And that's kind of how Cable is in the Deadpool flick, right? His family was,
Oh yeah.
demolished, and he goes back and he's trying to kill a kid. He's trying to take out a bad kid because he's going to become a bad person.
Even if you haven't seen it, the new South Park post-COVID, the movie that just came out on the Paramount Plus, it's a time travel story.
Of course it is. Back in the day before it. All right, so let's move into the next thing. We want to talk about alternate timelines. As touched on before, you can use branching timelines in a more controlled manner to help mitigate the risks of the campaign world, changing as a result of time travel. So rather than creating fixed points, when the characters jump to one point on the timeline to another, they create forks in the road, right? Which we talked about with branching. With one branch extending into the future as it always has, the other on which the characters find themselves goes a different direction. This is very a changeable future, right? A character could change Strahd in a previous example without fear of creating a paradox. The character would not be preventing Strahd from becoming a vampire on their timeline, but would create an alternate reality starting at the point at which his change was made. My favorite example of this is Trunks in Dragon Ball Z. He goes back in time to stop the androids that are attacking and demolishing the entire planet, and he helps all the Z fighters get stronger. They kick some ass. He goes to the future, and they're still there. Because it created a alternate timeline or a variation of the branch, right?
What I do love about that is the drastic difference between adult Trunks from that timeline and the kid Trunks where Vegeta's still alive.
Yeah.
Because he raised him, he's got more of an attitude than the other one does.
Yeah, he's a spoiled brat. He slapped him more than once.
Being raised by Gohan versus being raised by Vegeta.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what
nature versus nature.
Vegeta does.
If you hit me, I'll take you to the park.
He smacked. You didn't say you were going to hit back. I didn't say I wouldn't. So whether it is possible for characters to return to their original timeline is really up to you as the GM. It might be that whenever a character travels through time, they create a new timeline that moves in parallel with their own. So this is really cool because now the difference between branching is it's kind of always happening. With alternative timelines in branching, it only happens because of what the characters did.
Yep.
So now you got them running in parallel, in tandem, which is really cool because that creates its own different thing. And in such case, any return to the present places the character on alternative timelines present. So on the other hand, the characters could, return along the forked path and move back to their usual present. They would then be in the world unchanged by their actions in the past. So all that work they just did is nothing. But they made it better for somebody else. That counts for, okay, we got rid of Strahd, so let's all pack up our stuff and head on over to this reality. But Daddy, I'm half vampire. You shut your mouth. So has anybody played Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross or Another Eden?
I was trying.
Those are good examples.
Yeah, so if you're looking for really good examples of time travel, they do it really, really well.
Chrono Trigger has so many endings.
Oh my gosh, it is crazy. Here's an interesting read.
Prince of Persia, did they do that?
Yeah, Prince of Persia too. So Dulcinea says there was a story my dad read where it was impossible to return to the original timeline, but someone once tried and it instantly crashed with the parallel alternates where they were trying the same thing. So they basically just smashed two realities together. That is crazy, and I love it.
Was this a good idea for a topic? Because my head really fucking hurts.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Unfortunately, I think we're hitting keepers too.
Chronic trigger.
Because he keeps asking a lot of questions. It's like,
yeah, and that's okay. We want that, right? So
yes.
Let's actually answer one here. So, what can you do about a party in the present that is affected by the other forces changing time around them? Ooh, see, that's hard because they wouldn't know.
Yep.
Right. I think that in order to make something like that work, they have to have a reason that their visions would, or their world would be different around them. I would say that that would be a good thing to start off as like dreams, that as they get stronger, they're less impacted by it.
Yep.
So you could do something. I'm playing Final Fantasy VII right now, and so it's a very big story on imposter syndrome, where throughout the entire game, Cloud is having these little bit of flashbacks. But the longer the story progresses, the stronger those flashbacks become. And you could do something like that, where they, as they get stronger, they start to realize, I'm having two memories of these different things, but I don't actually know who or where this person is. And so you could feed it to them that way, I think. You want to read that one from Dulcinea?
Yeah. Dulcinea's comment is the whole idea of time traveling means you can never go home, which is kind of terrifying.
Absolutely, because it'll all be changed. All right, so
Now remember the RPG Feng Shui, which revolves around time travel and jumping back and forth between junctures in time.
Yep.
And they even make a point saying if you go back in time, or the timeline has changed in some way, shape, or form, you may change too and not even realize it. Unless you go to the netherworld, which you then become unstuck in time and become a constant.
Yeah, and I think that this is interesting too, because
you then say the same, but then become aware of changes around you.
Yeah, and the characters may not know these changes, but part of the fun is the players will.
Yep.
And I think this is a really great example to let the players change their characters a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they go back in time, they make a change, and instead of being a halfling, the character's mom got a little extra drunk one day, and now he's a Goliath. I think little changes like that, same character, same personality, different race.
But would you be the same character?
Well, that's the thing. You could expand upon that. I would say you could leave them however you want, but you can make little changes and get away with those in story too.
Oh, great. Now I'm picturing you go back to the ultimate timeline where you actually see you instead of a Goliath. Is that me? That be stronger than me? I hate me. I'm gonna kill me.
I love it. All right, so we're running out of time, so let's move on here. Right, Brandon?
Yeah.
On to
moving in time.
Yeah.
In time or through time? In time.
Just
Yeah.
go with what it says.
Whatever.
My stuff's
Knowing
always wrong.
the fucking risks and complications of time travel is just one step. How the characters travel through time is another. This can really set up the core of the story in a fun and interesting way.
Yeah.
For example, a campaign where a powerful god has tasked you with correcting a disturbance that may lead... Huh?
Or a Sphinx.
Or a Sphinx. Yeah, a disturbance that may lead to the end of the god. He just doesn't want to be around anymore. Rules might keep them from interfering directly, thus sending the characters. Or in a world full of powerful wizards experimenting with magic. It's like, doink, oops.
So this is really cool. So it talks about a god whose end is coming due to an event. And because the gods tend to not be able to directly influence things, they got to have champions. They're sending you back so that it'll continue to live. I think this is a great tool to tie into a paladin or a cleric or some character who's really heavily into their either patron or their deity that they worship. You know what I mean? So that's a really way to get that involved. And I think it's exciting to know going into it that if you fail, the deity that's granting your power is going to be gone. So now there's a fear that you'll lose everything you have. That's probably less true in 5e with a paladin than a warlock or a cleric, but you get my gist. So it's not uncommon for magic to go awry, as Brandon mentioned. So during a battle with a dark wizard, the characters could interrupt the ritual and the side effects toss them into a different point in time. Now their goal is just to get home without any real understanding of how they got to where they're at in the first place. Two examples will play out entirely different. And honestly, it's a great way to experiment with new worlds and mechanics in games, I think, which is a lot of fun. We are doing plane shifters right now on our YouTube channel, and that is an exact event that happened. You didn't travel through time, but you ended up in a different plane of existence.
Yep.
And so you can experiment with those different universes.
And the more murder hobo-y they are, the harder it is to get home.
Right.
Yeah. Despite all the problems that time travel can cause, it can be a powerful storytelling device. One you have to be careful with, though, and it opens your campaigns in ways that you never imagined. With the push of the multiverse and access to new planes, the type of stories and adventures will be endless. Now, one question we kept on having asked is, how can I handle this in my game? And I think there's quite a few ways you can do it that has been handled in ways by multiple properties. Like, as we established, you can just simply create a multiverse where no matter what they do in the past, it creates a new timeline that forks off. So you can either shift into that timeline or just keep them on their old one.
Mhm.
You can just simply say, okay, guys, you can have time travel, but you can only go forward. And then bounce back to the present. Not to the past. That's too much of a
Too
headache.
much to try to do, yeah.
And I've also seen like stuff where anything you guys do is already part of the timeline anyway, so you don't screw things up.
That's interesting because part of time is you've already time traveled, which comes back to how paradoxes are created, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
What?
Instead of a rust monster, an age monster. Every time it hits you, you age a certain number of years.
Oh, jeez.
Even worse,
Andrew,
you lose
that is
1d4
savage.
levels.
I do think there are some creatures that do that, actually.
Well, we just talked about one, right? The Sphinx can just age you.
Well, a ghoul.
Well, there's Ghoul too, I think, right?
Yeah.
There was one creature I remember seeing on a TikTok. I can't remember what it's called,
And-
but if it kills you, you just get erased from time, period. Like you
Yep.
never existed.
So let's talk about Balefire.
Oh. Actually, the last point I was going to make too is I've also seen like some probably say, no matter how you try to change time, time just to stay the same and try to force itself back to normal anyway.
Yeah. In Wheel of Time, they have a power called Balefire. And not only does it destroy something, it erases it from the pattern, which then forces everything around it to reweave itself, which disrupts anything related to it.
And the more powerful the blast, the further back in time you erase it.
Yep. So, and the bigger effect it has. So there are lots of ways we can kind of, play around with that. I would say if you're going to do time travel, start small. Days, weeks,
Keep it simple.
keep it simple.
Now I
to
feel
start
bad.
in the why?
Because I have a homebrew campaign, and
Yes.
that is the entire purpose of it. It is a time travel campaign.
You want to talk about it a little bit before we move on?
I will. I'll make it sweet
Maybe
and
some
simple,
of the challenges,
and hopefully it won't
things that go wrong.
give
things that
too
go
much
right.
of a spoiler for people who want to play it and start playing, which we'll eventually get on there. You start off going through this town, and they're like, "Hey, we need you to go up here to get this super awesome liquor, this mead called Bourbon Toe." yeah. And as you go up there, you enter this small town, and the players realize, "Oh, wait, we're not in the same time anymore. We have been sent back in time, like 500 years, because this elven child who has this extreme power says, we need your help. I'm putting this town in a time loop until my proper champions come. That's you guys. You guys come, you destroy the necromancer, you free them, and they're like, yes, we did it. And then as you come back to your timeline, you overshoot it by about 1,000 years. And it turns out that necromancer had been re-necromanced by a different necromancer. And he found the wish spell, made himself immortal, and he has devastated the entire planet or the entire world of Faerun, and he's now trying to open a portal to a new world to conquer that one. And it's your guys' job to stop it and get back to your original time.
That's awesome. I love it. Bourbon Toe strikes again. All right. So overall, there's a lot you can do. There's going to be risks, as Ian has pointed out over and over. But
like there is a reason why in a lot of RPGs where it's a possibility time travel's a very heavily banned power.
yes, and it's hard to keep everything straight too.
And in the extreme examples, okay, I have the power to go back in time. I go back in time 18 seconds in the middle of our combat.
That makes a difference.
Now imagine you do like, great, now I don't even remember where everything was, HP wise and stat wise, 16 seconds ago.
Oh no!
Now there's one more dynamics.
Jesus, that sucks.
Yeah,
very complicated. But anyways,
I didn't know that weeping angels erase people from history.
they actually send them backwards in time.
They send them backward?
According to Robin Hoodfellow, they erase them from history. It'd be interesting to know.
I'm not a huge Whovian, but
I'm sorry, a what?
Whovian, a fan of Doctor Who.
I'm gonna catch up in the last season.
Anyway, so that'll do it for our main topic today. Definitely, if you're interested in playing something like this, I've played in Brandon's homebrew campaign with the time travel, and it's a lot of fun. So make sure to go visit him. The link is in the comments there for signing up for one of his games.